Hello there. My name is Tracy Horner, and I am your instructor for this course. And I wanted to come to you to just briefly introduce myself and to also talk a little about the information in Chapter 1. As I said, my name is Tracy Horner. Just a little background on me. I live in Greenville, Tennessee with my husband and our two dogs and cats. So I am an animal person. My background, I grew up in Greenville, graduated from Greenville High School in 1991, went to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and my degree there was in communications. I majored in broadcasting. When I graduated from college, my goal was to get a job as a television news reporter. And that's what I did. Luckily, I got a job fairly quickly out of college doing that. Began reporting and eventually moved up to a morning news anchor position. And it was in that position that I realized that that was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. If you watch any news broadcasts, you probably realize most news is negative news, and I was a pretty positive person. So just the toll of getting up at 2 a.m. every morning to get to work to anchor the news and doing the things that are required, like covering fatal traffic accidents and drownings and court proceedings where you're having to chase down people and ask for interviews, that was just not me. So I actually left television news and got a job in radio. I did some on-air stuff. I did promotions, sales, and marketing. And after I worked at that radio station, I actually came to work for Tusculum College. And while I was working for Tusculum College, I went back to school and went through the professional studies program and actually earned my master's in management. So I can identify completely with where you are working full-time and pursuing a degree. I worked for Tusculum for a few more years and later worked for the Chamber of Commerce in Greenville, where I had a lot of dealings with a dean at our local community college, and he asked me to fill in as an adjunct instructor for a public speaking class. I had really never thought about teaching before, but he was in a pinch and asked me if I would be willing to fill in for him for that one class. And I did, and honestly, I fell in love with teaching. So I actually taught public speaking for Walter State Community College in Greenville and in Morristown for around 7 years, and then began teaching for Tusculum. I teach for the residential program in person. I also teach in person for professional studies and online classes like this one. After I worked for the Chamber of Commerce, I worked for the Niswonger Performing Arts Center in Greenville as their marketing director. And then I left there and actually I have my own business now with a company called Arbonne International, which is a health and wellness and skincare company. So I work for myself from home and I also teach. So that's a little about me. As you know, I have asked each of you to send me some answers to some questions so that I can take attendance for the first class and so that I can get to know you a little better. So if you haven't already done that, please do that as soon as you can. All right, I want to start by actually jumping into Chapter 1 and just hitting some of the areas that I think are most important. Chapter 1 actually talks about writing and your career. And if you think about it, writing is a very essential part of any professional environment that you are going to find yourself in. As a matter of fact, before you can even get a job in today's marketplace, you are required to write, most often, a cover letter and a resume. So in order to ever get the job, you are required to write. And as you actually advance higher into an organization, you will be asked to write more and more often. On page 1, it talks about writing in the workplace, and it begins by talking about writing for the global marketplace. And, years ago when we went to work for a company, chances are that company was just a local company, maybe regional, but that was it. But today, more and more companies are having connections both locally and regionally, as well as internationally. So it's very important that you are aware of how to communicate with a global marketplace. Every business, whether large or small, has to appeal to diverse international markets to be competitive. To be a successful employee in this highly competitive global market, you will have to communicate clearly and diplomatically with a host of readers from different cultural backgrounds. As a result, don't presume that you will be writing only to native speakers of American English. And when we are communicating with a global marketplace, it's very important for us to see the world through the reader's eyes. So what that means is you need to know who your audience is. And if you are writing to someone who is from a different culture, it's very, very important that you do your research, find out what their customs and beliefs are, and know what things are okay to say and not to say. If you misunderstand their culture by inadvertently writing or saying something inappropriate, it could cost your company a contract, and it could actually cost you your job. So it's very, very important. It's very important also that we use something referred to as international English. And if you flip over to page 4, it talks about this. It says the words, idioms, phrases, and sentences you choose instinctively for U.S. readers may not be appropriate for an audience for whom English is a second or even third language. To communicate with non-native speakers, you will have to use international English. It's basically just a way of writing that is easily understood. It's culturally tactful and diplomatic. International English simply means that your message is clear, straightforward, and appropriate for readers who are not native speakers of English. It's free from complex, hard-to-process sentences, as well as from cultural biases. Okay, let's move on now and look at the 4 keys to effective writing in the workplace. They are: who will read what I write? Number 2, why should they read what I write? 3, what do I have to say to them? And 4, how can I best communicate? First, we have to identify our audience. And this is very important because you are going to address different groups of people differently. For example, if you are in a workplace and maybe you are in a medical environment, you would address medical professionals much differently than you would address maybe a group of school children who is touring the medical facility. Knowing who makes up your audience is one of your most important responsibilities. Expect to analyze your audience throughout the composing process. And the textbook actually gives you some examples in the form of an ad to discourage people from smoking. And if you look there on page 5, the first poster is aimed at fathers who smoke. And it gives you the example there. It has the question, will your children follow in your footsteps? Children whose parents smoke are 50% more likely to start smoking than children whose parents don't smoke. And it actually has like a dad there with his child. So they are considering the audience and appealing to that audience. Their audience in that case is fathers. If you flip over to page 6, this is a poster directed at pregnant women, and it gives you the example there. So you actually have a pregnant woman in the photo with a cigarette in her hand. And then finally on page 7, there is a poster that is appealing to young athletes, and it says they smoke opponents not cigarettes, and it actually has athletes from different countries there. So they are specifically targeting young athletes. To more effectively assess who your audience is, you need to start by asking some questions, and you can find those questions there on page 6. First off, obviously, who is my audience? That's a good question to ask. You want to know who is going to be reading your work. Number 2, how many people will make up my audience? Is this something that you are writing to a group of people at work or just your boss? You need to know how many people make up your audience. 3, how well does my audience understand English? We talked a little about that earlier. 4, how much does my audience already know about my topic? Are they familiar with acronyms or specific verbiage that you'll be using, or do you really need to, make that very clear? What is my audience's reason for reading my work? What are my audience's expectations about my written work? Number 7, what is my audience's attitude toward me and my work? And then finally, number 8, what do I want my audience to do after reading my work? There on page 9, it talks about different groups of readers and how they will have different expectations and requirements. You need to understand those audiences' differences if you want to supply relevant information. And it actually gives you some for different audiences and the information that you would most likely be communicating. So it gives you the audience of maybe an owner of a company, a production engineer, operator, maintenance worker, and production supervisor. And out beside each of those, it gives you different examples of information that they would typically be expecting you to communicate with them. So those are some good things just to look over there. Key number 2 is establishing your purpose. By knowing why you are writing, you will communicate better and find writing itself to be an easier process. You want to get to the point right away. When you are in a business setting, this isn't the time to be lavish and descriptive. You want to get to the point right away. Key number 3 is formulating your message. Your message is the sum of what facts, responses, and recommendations you are actually putting into writing. And the length of messages may vary. It could be something as simple as a sign that says, "Do not touch wet paint," or it could be something as long as a long proposal that you are writing. And then number 4, select your style and your tone. What is style? When we talk about writing in the workplace, what do we mean when we say style? Style is actually how something is written rather than what is written. Style helps others to determine how well you communicate with the audience, how well your readers understand and receive your message. Some things that make up style are the construction of your paragraphs, the length and patterns of your sentences, and your choice of words. Now, what about tone? What do we mean when we say tone? Tone in writing, like the tone of your voice, expresses your attitude toward a topic and toward your audience. In general, your tone can range from formal and impersonal to informal and personal. Tone, like style, is signaled in part by the words you choose. For example, I'm at the bottom of page 10. Saying that someone is interested in details conveys a more positive tone than saying that person is a nitpicker. The word economical is more positive than stingy or cheap, and the word assertive sounds better than rude. And it actually on 11 gives you some good style and tone examples. Okay, if you flip on over to page 12, we're going to talk about the characteristics of job-related writing. And there are 6 that this book refers to. First is to provide practical information. On-the-job writing requires a practical, here's what you need to do or to know approach. One such practical approach is referred to as action-oriented. You instruct the reader to do something like putting together a ceiling fan, testing for bacteria. You're telling them how to do something specific. Another approach is referred to as knowledge-oriented, and this is where you are basically updating someone on a situation or why a company policy was changed, things of that nature. The second characteristic is giving facts, not impressions. With business writing, you want to stick to the facts. You don't want to insert your feelings and emotions when it comes to things. Characteristic 3 is providing visuals to clarify and condense information. This is especially important if you are trying to present a large amount of information. Maybe you have compiled some statistics and it would be better presented through a chart or a graph. Maybe you are trying to show someone how to do a specific task, like we said, putting a ceiling fan together, and it would be better presented if they actually had a diagram that they could look at and walk through those steps. If you turn over to page 14, it gives you a good example of a visual. In this particular instance, they are talking about a workstation, and they're giving a visual on the best way to be seated at your workstation. So it gives you pictures and bullet points on how to best make that work. Characteristic number 4 is giving accurate measurements. In workplace situations, sometimes you will be asked for measurements, and those need to be specific, because if you are in a situation like that and you're being asked for measurements, then chances are whatever you're producing or putting together or making, these need to be accurate so that it's done correctly. The 5th characteristic is stating responsibilities precisely. Job-related writing, because it is directed to a specific audience, must make absolutely clear what it expects of us or can do for that audience. Misunderstandings waste time and cost money. So it's not just about a misunderstanding like between you and a friend. A misunderstanding in the workplace can often be very costly for the company. Finally, the last characteristic is persuading and offering recommendations. If you are in a position, especially like a marketing or a PR position, then you are more than likely going to be trying to promote your company's image by persuading customers and clients. You are either wanting them to buy a product or service, or maybe you're wanting them to adopt a plan of action endorsed by your employer. To be persuasive, you will need to get your readers' attention and communicate clearly so that they understand your message and remember it. When you are writing persuasively in-house for people, particularly in your company, instead of persuading them to purchase something like a customer, you may be persuading them to take a new plan of action, to adopt a new policy. You know, that can vary. We will actually end this chapter by looking at ethical writing in the workplace. Writing ethically means doing what is right and fair and being honest and just with your employee, coworkers, and customers. And if you'll turn over to page 18, it gives you 10 ethical requirements on the job. First of all, you need to be honest, especially before you ever get the job, in your resume and in your cover letter. You know, don't provide false information about yourself. 2, obviously, you want to be respectful of your coworkers, customers, avoid bullying and things like that. 3, avoid language that may exclude others. 4, maintain accurate and current records at work. This can be very important depending on the position you are in. Next, comply with all local, state, and federal regulations. Adhere to your profession's code of standards of ethics. That'll vary from company to company. Follow your company's policies and procedures. You will also want to honor any guarantees or warranties that your company provides customers. Cooperate fairly with your team at work, and always respect all copyright obligations and privileges. On page 19, it gives you some good ethical rules to abide by in terms of computers. And then I want to wrap up by going over some things on page 19. These are some guidelines in terms of helping you make ethical decisions in the workplace. Number 1, follow your conscience. 2, be suspicious of convenient and false appeals that maybe go against your beliefs. 3, maintain good faith in meeting your obligations to your employer, your coworkers, customers, and community. 4, take responsibility for your actions. 5, document your work carefully and honestly. And 6, weigh all sides before you commit to a conclusion. There on pages 21 and 22, this chapter ends by giving you some pointers in terms of writing ethically. Your writing as well as your behavior must be ethical. Words, like actions, have implications and consequences. Unethical writing is usually guilty of one or more of the following faults, which conveniently can be listed as the 3 M's. Those 3 M's are misquotations, misrepresentation, and manipulation. And it gives you some good examples there. Plagiarism, we obviously as students all know what plagiarism is. Selective misquoting, which is basically just deliberately omitting damaging or unflattering comments to make yourself or your company look better. 3, arbitrary embellishment of numbers, basically just not representing the numbers or the facts accurately. 4, manipulation of data. 5, using fictitious benefits to promote a product or service. 6, unfairly characterizing by exaggerating or minimizing hiring or firing conditions. 7, manipulating international readers. And 8, misrepresenting through distorted or slanted visuals, making something look larger or smaller than it actually is. So that wraps up chapter 1. Your assignment before the next class, which will be our second week of class, will be to, on page number 5 and exercise number 8. So you're going to be doing exercises number 5 and number 8. 5, select one article from a newspaper and one article from either a professional journal in your major field or one of the following journals. State how the 2 articles you selected differ in terms of audience, purpose, message, style, and tone. Remember, we just talked about those different aspects of writing. So you're going to pick an article from a newspaper. It can be, I would encourage you just to look these up online, and you will email me a copy of each article. I need a copy of the article from the newspaper, and I need a copy of the article from a professional journal. And I encourage you to use the library resource, which is found on the page here. You can actually look at both of those. But you're going to review those articles and basically just state how they differ in terms of audience, purpose, message, style, and tone. Number 8, you will write a letter to an internet service provider that has mistakenly billed you for caller ID equipment you never ordered, received, or needed. So you will email that to me as well. A good reference for that, if you flip back over to page 17, it gives you a good example of an email that was sent to a business manager from an employee when they weren't paid correctly. So you can use this example to just compile a pretend letter to this company explaining what's going on there. So With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video. Please email me with any questions that you have, and I hope you have a great week.